Good afternoon, John Donovan.
Hi, Marty.
Welcome home. I guess you're back in San Diego.
I am back in San Diego. Had a month and a half road trip.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jack Kerouac Donovan on the road.
On the road.
Did you have a good
Worked out really
time?
well. I had an interesting time. I had met some friends that are in Asheville, North Carolina, Charlotte. Made some new friends in um, not Miami, Fort Lauderdale. Met some parents of a friend of mine. So it was nice.
Great.
Yeah.
That's a that's a hell of a series of cultural um, centers you drove through
Yeah.
all the way. So
From
you started and you went north.
Portland, Oregon,
Yeah.
east to Portland, Maine, and
Right.
then north of that, um, Bangor, and then Bar Harbor. That was my goal, to see the um, Northeast in the fall. So I did that.
Was it as gorgeous as it's often claimed to be?
Well, it was gorgeous. They claimed it wasn't as gorgeous as it normally is, but
Of
it was
course.
still gorgeous. Yeah. They said they had a late fall, so
Cool. And
yeah,
then you went down the coast,
down the coast, stuff
Carolinas,
in
obviously, and
Carolinas.
all the way to Fort Lauderdale. I think you said you went on to the Keys.
Yep, yep. I went all the way almost out to Key West, an island before it, and then stayed a night, looked at some stuff, and came back. Started home.
Did you get any fishing done?
That pole almost got in the water. I
Almost. All right.
almost got some bait wet, but it just didn't happen. So
Okay. And so then you must have driven across the south of America through
yeah,
Texas and so forth.
I went to Chaco Canyon on the way back. So I went a little bit north on the way back.
Is
Um,
that the one that's just south of Amarillo?
yeah, yeah. It's northwest of Albuquerque. Yeah, quite a trip. Like 20 miles of dirt road to get into it. So
Beautiful.
yeah.
Well, it's a beautiful country. I've had the opportunity to drive across it several times in my life, and it's always a spectacular experience.
Yeah, yeah. As was this. Yeah.
Great. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
I we always speculate about what we might want to talk about, and I had this thought as I was contemplating this about an hour or so ago, and so I'd like to talk a little bit about the book that I'm writing and
Mhm.
the blog that I'm writing about the book, and partly because you're in it, and 'cause I don't know if I've shared this on this podcast before, so I just like to say a few things, and we'll see what we can discuss.
Okay.
Um, as you know, John, and but not maybe everybody watching this podcast may not know about uh, over almost 30 years ago, I came across a writer named Ken Wilber,
Mhm.
Wilber. Ken Wilber is known for developing what he calls the integral model or integral theory. And while he's certainly not the first person in human thought to talk about integral, which is the idea that everything fits together somehow, and that
Mhm.
in order to understand one thing, it's more powerful to understand how it fits in and not just to try to understand it by itself. I
Right.
mean, that's certainly adequate, and for the way we live life, um, that works on a daily basis. Don't necessarily need to know about the history of electrons to appreciate turning on a light. But um, on the other hand, there's a lot of really powerful insights that can come to us in our lives and help us with problems if we had a deeper and broader understanding of what we're involved in.
Hmm.
And so I started reading his stuff in the 1990s, um, and his writing is pretty intellectual. It's pretty philosophical. It's not as obscure as Kant or Hegel by any means, but he tends to be very expository in the way that he writes. But the information that I learned from him, I have found to be incredibly valuable. Um, but there was always something missing. And when I met you, I started to understand what was missing. And what was missing was the access to the the integral experience. And partly because while he talks about the subconscious and he talks about the unconscious as being part of
Hmm.
everything, he doesn't spend a whole lot of time talking about accessing it and experiencing it. And so his approach to it tends to be formal. It's like here there's you all we all have a subconscious and we all have an unconscious, and sort of
Hmm.
tends to leave it there. So when I met you 11, 12, 13 years ago, the accountability practice solved a problem for me that I had in reading and understanding Wilber's work, which was another way of saying it, which was to put myself in the integral model and not just be looking at it from the outside.
Right.
So, um, and the key to it was unlocking the door to the subconscious. And the subconscious, again, I knew about it. I knew about shadow work and those kinds of things. And Wilbur even was writing by the time I met you of the importance of shadow work, but his approach to it was solitary. It's like, here's how you personally do shadow work. And my experience has been it's very difficult to do that on our own, that
Yeah.
it's much more powerfully done in a group of people where we can see our projections in real time among other people instead of sitting by myself and trying to figure that out on my own. Because as we know, the shadow, the repressed psychic experience and information about ourselves is designed to remain uncovered.
Hmm.
It's designed to remain hidden, and yet there are these experiences, triggers, and so forth that can actually open the door for us to see what we had in an earlier stage of our lives repressed from our conscious knowledge. I learned that from you. I didn't learn that from him. Again, formally, he would explain that stuff, but it didn't have practical value until I started doing the intentional living work. And so after you and I had been doing work together in the men's group that you facilitated for us here in Sacramento, I got this idea that I wanted to write about, I wanted to explore, I wanted to chronicle how I saw the information I got from Ken Wilber integrating with the information I got from you. And so I've written a book. It's called Creating Our World, and it's about 95% done. I'm just putting the finishing touches on the final chapters. It's all been written, but I'm doing some introductory work for each chapter that I hadn't done before. And and then I decided, based on a friend of mine who published a book on his own last fall, about a year ago, um, he suggested we were talking about how you publish a book, and he suggested that as I'm working on the finishing touches of the book, that I might want to begin to pre-market it by putting out a blog and starting to write commentary on the book itself. And so I starting in January of this year. I did that. It's called The Metaphysical Creationist, and So the title of my book is Creating Our World, and then I'm taking a play on the Christian idea of creationism, and
Hmm.
to take it from, to sort of just make a play on that by adding the word metaphysical, which is to say, um, almost everything that you and I talk about on the blog is using the accountability practice to create the lives we want.
Right.
And Ken Wilber actually has a lot of information about how that, not only how do we do that, but how the universe evolved to make that possible.
Hmm.
And so the question that my book takes a look at is you know, understanding all of this from the perspective of ongoing evolution. That we all come from somewhere, not merely our biological parents, but we come from uh, an evolution of life itself on this
Hmm.
planet, and the planet itself comes from an evolution of stars and galaxies going all the way back to the Big Bang, and um, and it's ongoing. And
Yeah.
that, so the hypothesis of the book is that we have a say into what evolution becomes going forward.
Yep.
That evolution is not uh, it's not merely random, although one can look at it and see it through it as if it's random. But when we see the fact that consciousness has evolved out of non-consciousness, then we at least are entitled to speculate that there's something going on here that has some kind of direction, as while being ignorant of what that direction might actually be. So so anyway, I just wanted to talk about uh, the fact that I've enjoyed writing this book. I've learned a lot about it. To invite anybody who's listening who might be interested in this kind of topic to check out my blog, which is on Substack. Just go to Substack and type in Marty Keller, and it will take you to the Metaphysical Creationist. And I just wrote a piece on transhumanism, which is it's a school of thought among some of us humans that we can actually engineer ourselves into the future, that we can, that we're smart enough to biologically engineer ourselves to, quote, be better, end quote.
Hmm.
And I certainly have a highly skeptical attitude toward that, but it is something that's real and that's out there, and something that there's value in being aware of. And I think that the development of artificial intelligence and the incredible things that AI will allow us to do um, would be better understood in this context of this transhumanist movement than just sort of saying, "Oh, it's another fun gimmick that will enhance my experience online."
Hmm.
Because there's always a lot going on that most of us aren't aware of, and there's value in being aware of it, as we know from our work here.
Hmm.
And so, so those are some of the things that I write about. I just did a three-part series looking at what's going on in Israel, and uh, trying to apply an integral analysis to it. And an integral analysis means looking at things from both the outside and the inside. What's the interior experience that people are having? And in order to get any kind of handle on that, you got to really have a sense of history
Yeah.
for those kinds of, well, for any kind, frankly, any
Hmm.
kind of experience um, has a pattern of recurring experiences. So what I learned again from you, that if I have a pattern of recurring experiences, then there's some historical, uh, there's something that got created by my history,
Right.
and that there's information for me there if I can get past the pattern, and as you've said before, work backwards to the origins. Like, okay, what was the original creation that led to a pattern? And usually we're talking about a pattern of resistance or fear or anxiety, uh, things that I've related to the family of origin body chemistry.
Hmm.
Um, well, that works on a collective basis as well as an individual basis. And so it's harder to get a handle on what a group inner experience is. Um, but we can at least offer to speculate and see if we can't have some kind of defendable basis for saying why we're speculating this. So what's the what's the interior experience of Israelis? What's the interior experience of Palestinians? There's these that's going on.
Yeah.
It's not just what's the exterior of this person attacked this person counterattacked. That's going on too, but there's also a deep subconscious as well as conscious experience that people are having that's I thought was worth taking a look at. I don't claim to be definitive on it at all. It's just offering us a way to look at things that we're not usually accustomed to doing. It's like, how do we look at this from a comprehensive or integral perspective? And, you know, in our culture, that's really important, in my opinion, because our media are usually um, very partial. They don't think comprehensively. And again, no blame, no judgment. That's just an evolutionary experience.
Yep.
So we, just as we do in accountability practice on an individual basis, we train ourselves to think differently, to look for things that um, we didn't know what to look for before.
Right.
So it's just like in my experience, having worked with you for over a decade, I see things in myself that I never knew existed before.
Hmm.
And I see them pretty automatically now. Whereas in the past, it's like, I don't want to see that. That's not
Right.
true. That's out there. That's not in here.
Right.
So so I'm having a lot of fun with that. And again, I acknowledge that you gave me the key to something I didn't have before, and allowed me to write about this.
Well, thank you. That I don't want to see, yeah, that's denial in therapeutic community or in the 12-step community. Sometimes we use that word as an accusation, like, "Oh,
Yep.
you're in denial," and the acronym we created for it states that, "Don't even notice I am lying." And my experience of that, and what I know about behavior coming from subconscious trauma, pre-verbal, nonverbal trauma, is that it's coming from my subconscious. So I'm not in the awareness of the action. It's subconscious. It's like driving a car on a long trip. You kind of come to after 3 hours of driving and you wonder how you got there because you were on automatic pilot. Now, that's the same thing happens when I'm back in before my recovery and well into my recovery, where I found myself in a knockdown, drag out argument where spit was coming out of both our mouths, and I had to figure out how I got there because I don't know the motivation, the subconscious wounding that thought that was a good idea for my survival. And but I could see the pattern. I did it over and over and over and over. Mine was rageaholic, alcoholic, workaholic. Um, with this information I've gleaned through my process, that if I say the truth of where I find myself, like I'm mean or violent, let's use I'm violent in my communication style with my partner. I'm violent. That statement of truth without blame or judgment has encoded in it the motivational factor of the subconscious that thought this was a good idea for my survival. And this is all subconscious, which is crazy making. I was fortunate enough to get to a place where I decided to go into a 12-step group first to quit drinking, and then I found Adult Children of Alcoholics, which spoke to me more, I don't want to say deeply, but differently, in that I could go to an adult child meeting and nobody would call on me. Um, AA, which is a powerful, fantastic group, saved millions of lives. They would have the habit, or in their meetings, they would point at people and say, "Do you want to talk?" And I didn't want to be pointed at. So I went to a meeting where nobody pointed at me. I could just sit there. And I did. I sat there for a whole year listening and judging and blaming and all the things I did. Um, so it was what I've discovered through this process. When I get back to the subconscious, I don't know what I'm doing. Um, when I first went to violence intervention class, the guy said, I can't tell you if you're in denial. That's something you decide one way or the other. He says, if you're in this class is for violent men. Then explained emotional, verbal, and physical. And then he simply said, if you're not violent, you're simply in the wrong class. You can go. And I couldn't, because what he explained to me is the pattern I was in. So I stayed, which meant I was then out of denial. Before that explanation, I wasn't violent. And I had empirical evidence to prove to you, and I had rationale, and there was nothing in my consciousness that said I was violent. Um, and if I was, and I had violence mixed up with touching or hitting somebody, um, that was because they did something to make me, and it wasn't my fault. So that awareness got me out of denial. And I remember him saying, the way out is being accountable, no blame, no minimizing, and no collusion with somebody else. And as he was saying that, and I had realized how violent I was, something flushed through me, because what I felt was that he was giving me the information I was missing to move from where I was at to a more, I want to say, enlightened, lighter, more aware place. He was giving me the information for my own enlightenment. And so I stayed. And this was not rational. I just knew something was vital for me to stay and figure out what was going on. So, and from that moment to whenever I developed, and it was a process, developing the intentional living material. Um, it's just, it's information that I've been blessed with that has changed my life in meaningful ways, and given me the freedom to express my authentic self. And I could talk for an hour about the differences between what I was and who I am today. And it was addressing the subconscious, not trying to figure it out here on the outside, get that person to do this. And if that person does that, I'll do this exactly right. So that that person, all that stuff, addressing the subconscious through the truth of where I find myself. And that moment where he said, if you're not violent, you're simply in the wrong class, just was profound for me, because I came out of denial. I didn't know all the details, but I did know that based on his definition of violence, I was violent. So then all this material started coming together when I
One of the
started
things that I love, I'm sorry.
when I started facilitating in the jails. After I went through the class, I started facilitating in the jails, and this material came out of that experience. So go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, well, I was going to say one of the things I love about what you just said and about the process is that it is both susceptible to a general discussion. And in my book, I have a I have a history of accountability practice. I talk about origins of stuff that you've shared with me about all the different elements that contributed to this. Um, so you can have an overview, a history, or whatever, and it's all comprehensive and makes sense. And at the same time, it's very specific to what's going on in my life in the moment.
in the moment. Yeah.
And that's what I love about it, because I can explain it to others. I can talk about my experience, and I can say, well, oh, do you want to work on that? Because how what is your experience? Would you say the majority of us who come to intentional living classes or meetings are people who have a specific thing that's in our way that we don't know how to solve?
Correct.
And maybe we've tried other things and they haven't worked. So we're like, I'm looking for help with this thing, not I want to change my life and create a life that I intend to live. That comes later.
Right.
For most of us, I want relief for something
Ex-
that is bugging me and I can't figure it out.
Right. Or I was just talking to a client that was in a crisis situation. Everything he's been doing and wanting was to avoid this particular thing, and then everything he did not to get there, boom, he was there, and
Right.
um, it was a moment of everything I thought was the right thing to do just fell apart. Just it's and um, actually, I asked him if he would be willing to just say, "I surrender," and then feel it in his body, not tell me what he was surrendering to or
Right.
tell me
Right. Right.
how he was going to surrender, and just have this statement, "I surrender," because I'm terrified. He got into the terrified, felt that. We didn't fix it. We just were with it. And then I suggested, and he just went right to it. I said, how about saying, I surrender? And he surrendered. And then what opened up was all kinds of resources that I hadn't even thought about before, um, to offer him. And he simply wrote it down and said, I'll do that. He had three things to do, and he was going to do all three of them.
Right.
And he's done. He's done trying to figure it out. Um,
Well, it reminds me of what you just shared reminds me of the traditional way that I know you have usually open meetings, which is, I forget the three of them, but have you ever found yourself in an argument and realized you were wrong and continue to argue the same
Yeah,
way?
yeah, yeah. The first one is, have you ever hurt somebody you love, regretted it, and then found yourself doing it again, usually the same way, that
Right.
pattern? And then the argument, like, oh, I'm on the wrong side, and you continue to argue anyway. The last one is, have you ever known you're about to do something and you knew you would regret it? And you even heard that little voice said, what the hell are you doing? Stop. Just no, it's not cool. And you found that you couldn't or wouldn't. And it's like, okay. And I preface that by saying, I'm going to tell you why you answered the way you answered these three questions. And most people, it's yes, yes, and yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Me
So
too.
that's like that gets their attention. And then I go through the obstacles and talk about how the logistics of childhood trauma. Childhood trauma, you survived. So there's a way to survive that trauma, and it comes out in your behavior right here. It's not magical, mystical, confusing. Whatever behavior I had, violent, mean, alcoholic, workaholic, was in alignment with the information from my childhood about the pain I went through, and it got stuffed. So to keep me safe and survive, I had to not touch that. So not touching that meant, well, alcohol works good to not touch that. Workaholic works really well to not be with people that scare the shit out of me. And I say I love them, and I don't know how to act there, and it's painful anyway. Um, so the behavior, the pattern, is always in alignment with a childhood trauma. It hurts. It does cause separation and destruction. My behavior impacted myself and the people around me in a very detrimental way. Yes, it was not out of alignment with my childhood trauma. And working in the jails for 20 years in the institutions, I saw these men struggling with what they had done to get there. And I could see I want to say innocence, the genuineness, the real person, and then them having to live with what their behavior was, and um, talking about accountability and taking them through the accountability tree where they could find relief and see and actually feel the impact out of denial, out of their subconscious, out of their unconscious, feel the impact of their behaviors on themselves and the people around. And that once I felt the impact of what I had done to my children, my partner, and felt the pain of that, I was then not willing to inflict that pain on somebody else because I had felt that pain. I knew what pain was. Before that moment, people would say, well, that hurt. And I'm like, going, but I don't know what you're talking about, but that hurt. But you just don't want to hear me, or what? I would make up some kind of excuse. But now when somebody says that hurt, I know what hurt is. And it is the last thing I want to do, which is inflict or impact people in a detrimental, hurtful way. So,
My light just failed here.
yeah, I saw that.
Come on now.
So,
Oh well, I'll be in the dark for a while. Um,
let me read this thing I wrote about explaining, if you don't mind,
yeah, go ahead.
intentional living, because it's. I know we keep talking about it, and one of the things that why this works so well as a facilitator, and I know you've done this too, is that you actually take a person in so that they can experience the feeling tone, the frequency of something, and everybody's different. So I was thinking about how difficult it is to explain this, or even us talking about it, and this came to me. It is not my intention to explain intentional living, but to shed light on esoteric concepts that generally elude understanding. The why of my behaviors, patterns, and expectations come from a seeming ethereal, subconscious, elusive, and shadowy source. Accessing subjective and enmeshed experience is the domain of the subconscious. It's that place of no words. It's a feeling place. I have the experience of that no word place, and having gone there, I emerged into a sense of myself instead of the ability to articulate the who or why of me. The actions in which I found myself became fluid and flowing. And again, I don't go to the explanation of myself, nor do I care to. I am being myself. That speaks volumes. One of my struggles pre-recovery and in recovery was reading and trying to find an answer. It's like, somebody please tell me what it is that's going on. And I would read whoever, and it would, like, I didn't understand what they're saying. I started reading some of the philosophers like Kierkegaard, and my experience of that was that they talked in circles. It's
I was
like,
gonna
just
say,
say
hats off to you.
it. I know. They talk in circles, and it's like, what? No, just tell me, just tell me. And in that angst, in that seeking, I want to say I created the experience of relief, which is the accountability process, the accountability tree, which I've outlined and then take people through, because we can talk about it, and somebody who knows it, feels it, and has experienced it tries to explain it, and what that created for me was confusion and like angst and anxiety and frustration. And the experience of truth, where I find myself based on my experience, which is 9/10 subconscious, and that's where we hold all our trauma, pre-verbal, nonverbal, and a lot of the trauma, even in my adult life, is nonverbal. It's a feeling tone. It's a tear or
Yep.
a obstruction. It's a dense energy, and I really don't have the words for it. And this process of the accountability tree, if I just simply own the results of the total accumulation of my life and just say where I find myself, whatever that pattern is, alcoholic, workaholic, mean, violent. And I just say that with no blame or judgment. And the no blame or judgment comes in the breath. When I utter, voice, I'm violent, I found that in that truth, no blame, no judgment, has encoded in it the subconscious message that thought that was a good idea for my survival, which is a key point. Me being mean kept people away from me. Well, in my childhood, I learned that people hurt, especially the ones that say they love you the most. People hurt. So I grew up as an adult. This is in my subconscious. I get close to somebody and I start acting the fool. It's like, what the hell? It's like, or it wasn't me. Obviously, it wasn't me. It was them. They lied to me. And this mess starts, this chaos and drama and crisis. And it's like, where did this come from? I don't want this. And then when I said the truth, I'm mean, I'm violent towards my partner, I'm mean to my children. In that statement, and again, I emphasize no blame, no judgment, it's in the breath, I'm mean to the point of cruelty to my children, had encoded in it the the trauma that motivated me to do this. Now, that statement, I'm meaning, or to the point of cruelty to my children, hurt. It was devastating. I'm not saying it wasn't destructive, because it was destructive. It was not out of alignment with the childhood trauma. And in that statement, there was a relief, that like a shedding, like a whew. And because I had just validated the truth that was stuck in me that I don't know, subconscious, I don't denial, I don't know, and I still don't know details, but I do feel the relief of the validation. And then I say in the process, accountability, treated truth, the emotion happens. I don't have to even know what it is. I don't have to describe it. The emotion happens. And in that feeling tone, I say, I intend to be kind. Or if I'm working with somebody, whatever their statement is, I lead them into an intent that is specific to the statement. Like for me, I'm violent, I intend to be kind, or I intend to be gracious, or I intend. And that intent goes back into the subconscious and is now part of my memory, part of my subconscious, which means the total information that's feeding into my choice mechanism, where I make the decisions, is different. So the decision is different and the outcome changes. It's different. I would like to say better. Sometimes it is better. Other times it's an awareness of how deep I am in some kind of denial or pattern that is destructive, the immensity of it. I want to say I now see that as better. The more I'm aware of something, then I can address it. If I'm not aware of it, I can't address it. So um, I'm gonna stop. Wow.
You know, it's interesting that it appears to be the case almost universally that the the doorway to this experience that you're talking about, the doorway to this experience that we can say, at least at the very least would say, is different,
Yep.
We can actually say it's better if we want. I mean, we're in charge,
Mm.
but
Right.
um, almost universally has to come as a result of some kind of struggle. That it's not something that we can reason ourselves to. It's not even something that someone can teach us.
Right.
It's got to be an experience that we're having in real time. Um, in one of the books that I read by Ken Wilber before I met you has this concluding essay. It's called The Great Search. And he talks about how we are designed to look for God, or the way he uses it, he uses the word spirit with a capital S. We're designed to
Mm-hmm.
look for spirit. And he goes, this is an utterly, utter waste of time because we're already spirit. So we're looking for that which we are, which means we don't see ourselves that way. And he said it's as futile as trying to see yourself see. It's like you can't, just not designed. You can't. The eye is designed to see stuff coming in from out there, not to see itself.
Right.
So he said, the fact that this is futile, the fact that all of the great sages say, it's a waste of time. You're already spirit. You're already connected. You're already 100% the same substance as the divine. It doesn't stop anybody from doing this. It's like we all do it.
Mm-hmm.
We're not capable of assimilating that information from outside ourselves. It's like, okay, you're actually already spirit. You don't need to look for it. So he says, so instead, what happens is that we engage this search. We look and we look and we look, and I think that the paradigmatic story about that is the Buddha. He left his home looking for the truth, and he wandered around India, and he spent 20 years as an ascetic, sitting, collecting alms and having nothing and so forth. And that didn't work.
No. Mm.
Well, what did work? Well, what worked was when he stopped and he sat under the Bodhi tree and he just stopped. And that's what Wilber says. It occurs, the insight starts coming. And what made me think of this is when you were sharing about this individual you're working with who said, I surrender. It comes when we surrender.
Mm-hmm.
It comes when we go, you know what? I just can't figure this out.
Right.
I don't know what to
Yes.
do. I
Yeah.
I think of the story, the archetypical story of the alcoholic who just gets on his knees and says, God help me, I can't stop drinking.
Yep. Yep.
And there's something about that surrendering experience that, just what you said, it's new information gets introduced to our subconscious that was never, it was always there in potential, but it hadn't been activated. It took me to go, it's for me, it was the day I sat in at the men's meeting. I said, yeah, I guess I like being in debt.
Mm-hmm.
I surrendered all of the struggles, the conscious struggles I was having to get out of debt, because I just kept getting myself into it more and more,
Right.
because I didn't know, I didn't have the information yet that I was doing all this to get a certain feeling state:
Yep.
agitation, fear, anxiety, all those things. I was clueless. But once I got the clue and I surrendered to it, I said, okay, yeah, I love being in debt. Everything changed. And
Yeah.
to this day, years later, I can't specifically explain to you who understand it, much less somebody who's hearing this for the first time, how that happens.
Right.
There's something foundational about surrender. And there's something about us humans that doesn't want to surrender. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's like, so we're, I don't want to say doomed. What would be a better word? We're fated to keep trying until we come to some kind of grace where we go, you know what, trying isn't working anymore. I'm going to stop.
Yeah. Take a breath.
Take a breath.
Surrender.
And again, for me, the accountability practice is a version of that. It taught me to let go in the moment of my crisis, my suffering, my fear, and to just be willing to be afraid and just feel it. That's a surrender. activity.
When the guy's name was Pete, said that if he explained violence, he said, if you're not violent, then you're simply in the wrong class. If you are, stay. That moment I owned or realized, oh my God, I'm violent, something happened. It's like, it's all the chatter went away. All
Mhm.
the what if, and I didn't mean to, and they did. And I just sat down, open, and curious, um, and willing. And things started changing drastically from that moment. Just, it was, um, oh my God. And now, then I applied that to other aspects of my life. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a workaholic. I'm mean. And I use 5 words that start the process to own where you find yourself, because you don't know, you're subconscious, man, you don't know. And I use the 5 words: arrogant, entitled, mean, controlling, needy. And I ask the person, which one of those do you find the most resistance to owning? Own that, and then take it to the tree, take a deep breath, and then that thing happens. That sloughing, that softening, that, oh my God. Oh, and then when they first started, of course, we lead them into the intent. And when they do it again, because there's a lot in the subconscious, there's a myriad of things that happen to lead to some behavior. Just simply owning the behavior, owning the behavior. I intend to be kind. I intend to be gracious. I intend to hold myself in high regard. If it's I'm worthless, I intend to hold myself in high regard. And things become different. It's like, wow, I didn't see this before. I don't even ask how come I didn't see it. I know why I didn't see it before, because of the filter of the subconscious pool maintaining my survival, which is recreating that body chemistry of stress and angst and like annoyance, like you said, because that's what my body knew to survive. My body knew that. My rational mind had it. Was like, that's ridiculous. And then I found myself in there again, time after time after time. So owning it and letting go of the chatter, the even fix it. There was nothing to fix. I'm violent. I intend to be kind. There was, well, that no blame, no judgment. It's like when my grandson is feeling frustration, and I usually use the example of the second cookie, but there's a lot of things that he wants now, and when he hears no, he it becomes emotionally dysregulated, and I mirror back. I see you're angry. I see you're upset. I see you're frustrated, and take a breath, and we move on. He's learning to notice the body sensation based on what he wants, can't have it, and he's hopefully. Well, we all have work to do. I'm not the only person in his life, so we'll see. But he has an advantage. I'm is my intent to inflict as little childhood trauma as I can. I'm not perfect. I wish I was perfect, but yeah,
Well, that's ironic. I really I listen keenly to language, and it's even interesting you say I'm not perfect, and yet you are perfect just the way you are.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
we get caught in this verbalisms that are all, in my opinion, left over from childhood trauma. They're ways that we still can get hooked. And what you taught me on all those things is like I give myself permission to be imperfect,
yeah.
and I hold value as a human being.
Hmm.
I use that a lot in the facilitation, and it almost always results in a visible relaxation of tension or agitation because it's loving.
Mm-hmm.
It's an act of love. I give myself permission to be wound up. I give myself permission to be fucked up. I give myself permission to be full of mistakes. I give myself permission to be arrogant, mean, entitled, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that's what you're doing with Solomon,
Mm-hmm.
is you're offering him um, an environment where he is allowed to be how he is in the moment
Mm-hmm.
without an adult authority figure trying to disrupt, change, fix, transform his experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, to me, again, that's one of the very practical things that I've learned in doing this accountability practice. It's like, you know what? I'm 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 all wound up here and I can't change it. So I'm just gonna be wound up. And I find when I do that, that the duration of the experience is shortened compared to what it would have been if I really got into it.
Right. Try to
Or I
fix it. Get it right.
or I tried to blame myself because I couldn't stop it, or all of those tail chasing things that we were trained to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, I'm not going to chase my tail. I'm going to sit here and be wound up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why I say again that among the things I love about the process is it's very practical. It's about what's going on in the moment. Again,
Mm-hmm.
I can I can abstract it into large environments. That like the last three chapters of my book are a speculation about, can we apply these realities to us as a collective and not just us as individuals? All of that experience that we've talked about in my subconscious, there's also a collective subconscious. There's a
Mm-hmm.
human subconscious. So there's not only do I always, what's our principle? I'm always getting what I want.
Yeah.
It's also equally true by extending the Wilber integral model, we are always getting what we want.
Yep.
Now that's a little tougher to get our hands around because the we does not know how to express itself yet, except through very primitive kinds of experience and expression.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have tools. Even in our group practice, we haven't developed the tools to examine who the we are in the room or what's the we experience. But it's there. Just as right now between the two of us, there's your experience, there's my experience, and there's our experience,
Mm-hmm.
all happening simultaneously. But our tools for understanding, exploring, this is a word that many people use, the we space, those are primitive and those are part of what we're just learning about. But to me, that's the next frontier. And that's, again, the power of the accountability practice is it's practical. And every once in a while in group, it shows up when there's some kind of conflict or there's some kind of unhappiness that someone is experiencing about somebody else in the group and is willing to speak the truth of it. And then the group, you can feel the group kind of go,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Mm-hmm.
that that essentially exposes collusion, because collusion's a group experience.
Yep.
And we're not even aware of that. I participate in the collusion, you participate in the collusion, but there's no collusion unless we are doing it together.
Correct. Yeah.
So I'm just saying that this is, to me, the next frontier is that, again, the last part of my book speculates, how do we apply the accountability practice to us and not just to each of us individually?
Yeah. Um,
And I have no answers. So if you read the book, you won't get the answer.
I don't know either, and all I know is that I want to be there when it happens.
Yeah. Well, and I assert that as we do this work, we are developing that we space little by little. It's like there's no hurry. Evolution's got this. God's got this. It's like one of the things that I've come to a conclusion. Or let's just call it a hypothesis. I don't know if it's true. There is a pace to this evolution. We are part of setting that pace, but we are not in charge of it.
Correct.
There's something else going on, and it's okay by me. It's like I intend to contribute what I can contribute until I can't contribute anymore.
Yeah, that's the same place I find myself. Whatever it is going on, whatever my part is, I'm all in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. And then we'll see where it shakes out in the
Yeah.
future. Or in the now, it could be, we never know. We don't know what is going to happen.
Yeah. In my arrogance, I like to think I am in charge, but I just love my arrogance. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Okay.
and then I can surrender it. It's like, I don't need to be in charge. I'm willing to not be in charge. And my life's better when I'm willing to not be in charge.
Mine is too.
Exactly. Well,
Okay.
Mr. D, we've come to the end of our time together. Is there any last minute thoughts that you have before we wrap up?
Um, Actually, no.
All right. Well, welcome back. I'm glad you had a wonderful time. It was great doing some podcasts with you on while you were on the
Yeah,
road.
yeah.
And I was a little startled when you came on and you weren't in the van. It's like, what do I do?
Yeah, yeah. I've
So,
got my nice chair here, so it's cool.
all right. Well, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
You got it, Marty. Thank you. Love you.
Love you too, brother.
Mhm.